Dan Blocker didn't have much time for his family while he was on Bonanza. That's what his son Dirk says now. Sincere, a little sad, and surprisingly raw after all these years. Blocker has probably played Hoss Cartwright before. He was the big guy with the even bigger heart who always got into trouble with a silly smile and a strong sense of right and wrong. Behind that friendly smile, though, was a man who barely had time to breathe, let alone eat dinner with his kids. In the 1960s, Dirk says they couldn't go to a fair or ball game without seeing a crowd gather around their dad. Hoss was a national gem, not just a funny guy. People of all ages wanted to hug him and shake his hand. Everyone also only wanted one picture with him. And Dan, he did a great job with it. He'd move around, smile, sign, and pose. But when it came to his own kids, all that attention hurt. He once said that you were lucky if you could take your family to Disneyland and enjoy the rides without having to deal with a lot of people. Those times didn't happen often for him. He lived with his wife Dolphia and their 4 children in the San Fernando Valley. There are 2 boys and 2 girls. They made the house bigger after Bonanza took off. There are more rooms, a game room, and even a pool. But it looked like the outside world could always get in. Dan could have moved to Beverly Hills where all the other famous people live. That's what the producers and managers told him to do. They said the schools were better up there. Dan, though, saw right through it. There are better schools, which means they cost more and have more wealthy parents. Dan didn't want that kind of life. He once told a reporter, "If the schools in the valley are good enough for general kids, they're good enough for mine." He really meant it. Blocker was about 6 feet 4 inches tall and 300 pounds, but he wasn't trying to act like he was bigger than life. His only goal was to become a dad, who taught his kids right from wrong and put them to bed by 8 o'clock. Dan and Dolphia had a plan. Kids who weren't asleep by 8 were kicked out of the 8 o'clock club for a whole week. It may sound silly, but it worked. The kids were eager to fit in. The routine was good for them. Dan let Dolphia be the police officer. He was the soft one, like a teddy bear. He even said that their kids were a pretty good group. But the thing is, your kids can see that when you're Hoss Cartwright to everyone else. People watch you fight thieves on TV. They see you trip and shoot yourself in the shoulder, and still fight big men like it's nothing. It doesn't matter to them if it's not real. Dan told them it was all in their heads, though he said it wasn't real. One of his daughters still broke down in tears during a very emotional scene. He was shot, but only got a small cut. She ran up to him, looked at his head, and asked if he needed an aspirin. That's how close they were. The person wasn't seen, they saw Dad. That's what fans meant. They saw the hero and the cowboy, but not the man who couldn't sleep because he was afraid he was missing the best years of his kids' lives. You have to go back to Texas, long before the ranch and Hollywood, to really understand that. Dan was born in the small town of DeKalb, which is in Bowie County. He came from a poor family. Orishak Blocker and Mary Arizona Blocker were his parents. They owned a small grocery store in O'Donnell, Texas. That doesn't really sound like a place where a future TV star would live, but Dan was different. He stood out even when he was a child. Even when he was younger, he was already very tall. By the time he was an adult, he was huge. He weighs 300 pounds and has hands that are as big as dinner plates. But people don't understand this. Besides that, he was kind and gentle, and he could end a fight without getting angry. He first went to Texas Military Institute in 1940. Not only people watch Hoss, they are ready for him. When he shows up, they cheer. They laugh when he says the wrong thing. They believe in him. You might not know this. Dan didn't act like a crude cowboy when he played Hoss. An old quote that stuck with him gave him direction. He thought about being kind every time he put on Hoss's boots. About being good while you still can. Because, as he once said, we only come this way once. People who watched felt that, especially kids. Many letters were sent to Dan over the years. One was from a boy and just said, "I wish you were my dad." That hurt him a lot. It wasn't about becoming famous. It wasn't about the scores. It had to do with what Hoss stood for. Happiness, safety, and love. Dan kept that letter. Every long shot was made. It feels a little better every time you miss a family dinner. But Dan doesn't slow down, even though the show's numbers are going up. He has a job outside of Bonanza, too. He stars with Frank Sinatra in the 1963 movie, Come Blow Your Horn. Then again in 1968, in Lady and Cement. He plays a tough guy that time, which is very different from Haas. It works. He can be scary when he wants to be. Later, Stanley Kubrick thinks about putting him in Dr. Strangelove as Major T.J. King Kong. That's the part that rides the atomic bomb in the last scene. Dan never plays the part. Though before he even has a chance to read it, his agent turns it down. In the end, Slim Pickens does it. People who study movies still wonder what would have happened if Blocker had said yes. Dan still has plenty of work to do. He plays the lead role in Something for a Lonely Man in 1968. He plays John Killebrew, a blacksmith who starts a new town from scratch. Fans love the story because it has a lot of heart. Then, in 1970, he changes things up again with The Cocky Cowboys of Calico County. This time it's a funny movie. He portrays a shy single man with a strange charm. What about the cast? Famed people like Jim Backus, Mickey Rooney, and Jack Elam were there. Now comes the part that really shocks people. Not only is Dan Blocker an actor, he's also making a name for himself. He buys a piece of a new restaurant chain called Bonanza Steakhouse in 1963. When he shows up, Dan is Haas. He's in the ads. Yes, he does shake everyone's hand, sign every menu, and take every picture when he comes in. The company grows quickly. People believe in Haas. Trust Haas if he says the steak is good. Dan doesn't do it by himself. In 1964, he brings his son Dirk to the big screen for the first time. It's a small moment for the Blocker family, but it's a big one for the car ad. Later, Dirk said that it was one of the first thoughts he had of his dad's job. It wasn't the TV or the ranch. It was an ad. They worked together, just the two of them, happy. That's how close they were. You might think that kind of success would make a man crazy, but Dan isn't like that. He doesn't move. He stays humble. He always thinks about where he came from. A young director named Robert Altman is one of his friends on the set. They got along well. After many years, Altman wants Dan to say goodbye for good. He wants him to be Roger Wade. Bad things happen before the movie starts. Dan unexpectedly dies. Sterling Hayden will play the part. The last cut of the movie is a tribute to Dan Blocker. Bonanza is almost at the end of its run. People are becoming different. The TV is changing. But Dan? He still shows up, still jokes around between takes, still talks to all of his fans, and still leaves his wife and kids every night in the valley. But behind the steakhouse, the fame, and the wealth, the stress starts to rise. Dan's health starts to worry people. His weight is making him feel bad now that he's been big his whole life. People who are close to him start to worry as he keeps working and happy. So, Dirk remembers the last few years, the long shoots, and the quiet times at home. Those memories are about to become the main focus. What did the Blockers' real lives look like when they weren't in the studio? What finally broke the man that fans thought couldn't be broken? Even though he wore a cowboy hat and smiled, Dan Blocker had a strong sense of purpose and loved his family deeply. He wasn't a TV star when he wasn't on camera. He had strong principles and was a father and husband. She was Dolphia Parker and he married her. They met at Sul Ross State University, Key University. They had 4 kids together and raised them in Los Angeles. Their children were David and Dirk, a son, and Dana Lynn and Deborah Lee, a girl. And all of them felt the effects of Dan's huge presence. David Blocker did well as a director in Hollywood. For making Don King only in America, he won an Emmy in 1998. While this was going on, Dirk became an actor and kept the Blocker name in front of the camera. The kids, on the other hand, knew how much Dan loved and cared for his family, even though fans could only guess. Dan didn't make a big deal out of his views, but he stood firm on them. He was a proud Democrat and a free Methodist. In 1966, he openly backed California Governor Pat Brown. Later, he backed Eugene McCarthy and Hubert Humphrey for president. In front of everyone in Hollywood, when it would have been safer to keep quiet, Dan spoke out. He had fun too. His 1965 Chevrolet Chevelle 396 X16 was one of his favorite fast cars. He drove a real Huffaker Genie Mk10 race car called the Vinegaroon in real road racing events, such as the Can-Am series. What happened in 1972 couldn't have been stopped, even though Dan loved speed and had a lot of energy. Dan Blocker, who was only 43 years old, had a normal gallbladder surgery at Dainetha